Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. You're going to close your eyes and fall asleep to the soothing, tissue-soft tale of toilet paper. Yes, really. Imagine this. You're standing in the middle of an ancient Roman bathhouse and someone just handed you a damp sponge on a stick and said, "Good luck." Or maybe you're in medieval Europe, glancing nervously at a pile of straw. This story doesn't start pretty, and you probably won't survive this history without cringing at least once. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is there, so post your location and local time in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are not in a modern bathroom. There are no flush buttons, no chrome handles, just a vague smell of wet moss and salt. You trudge across the dusty floor of an ancient dwelling, maybe Mesopotamian, maybe Egyptian, holding, well, nothing helpful, and now nature calls. Back then, personal hygiene wasn't so much a routine as it was an improvisation. In ancient Sumeria, clay tablets and early texts mention cleanliness rituals that involved water, sand, and occasionally sharp-edged pottery. Yes, pottery. You try not to imagine the implications. Historians still argue whether these practices were ceremonial or everyday, but either way, you wouldn't want to forget which side of the shard is safe. Shift the setting. You're in the Indus Valley around 2500 BCE. Sophisticated sewage systems snake under the city. The inhabitants were surprisingly advanced in plumbing with sit-down toilets and drainage. But again, no paper. Instead, they likely used water, smooth stones, or pieces of cloth. You wonder briefly what laundry day must have looked like. Then we move to ancient Greece. The preferred method? Ostraka, small pieces of broken pottery. Sometimes these were even inscribed with the names of people you didn't like. That's right, they weaponized passive aggression and hygiene in one go. And let's not forget the Romans, those architects of empire and enema. They used the tersorium, a communal sponge on a stick stored in salt water or vinegar. You, standing in your tunic, reach for it and realize someone else used it right before you. Sharing wasn't always caring. In Northern Europe, the Celtic and Germanic tribes weren't too bothered by refinement. Leaves, moss, and snow were fair game. Ever wiped with a pinecone? No. Count your blessings. And yet, despite the roughness, there's something deeply human in these early approaches, making do with what you have, adapting to your environment, learning from nature, or just ignoring it completely and using your left hand. Over in Japan, early records talk about chugi, slender sticks used for wiping, an elegant if slightly terrifying solution. Meanwhile, in Hawaii, coconut shells were an option. You pause here, imagining the exfoliation. Quirky as it sounds, these methods weren't random. They were deeply tied to climate, geography, and cultural taboos. Hotter regions leaned toward water-based cleansing, while colder areas preferred solids like wool, wood, or even, you guessed it, fur. Arctic peoples supposedly used dried animal skins, snow, or whatever they weren't currently wearing. Comfort wasn't a top priority. What's fascinating is the consistency. No matter where you were in the world, this was a shared human dilemma. Everyone had to answer the same daily question: now what? Historians still debate whether there was any real etiquette around this, or whether it was just a free-for-all. Some evidence from Egyptian tombs hints at perfumed cloth and scented oils, suggesting that the rich, at least, had a more luxurious post-potty routine. But for most, it was bark, bones, or barely their linen scraps. Toilet paper, as we know it, wasn't even a glimmer in the ancient eye. And yet from these scattered practices came evolution. Slowly, ideas crossed borders. The notion of using something disposable, absorbent, and soft would take a while to develop, but the groundwork was here. Crude, often gross, sometimes painful, but here. Imagine trying to explain your two-ply quilted roll to someone from 4,000 years ago. "It's got aloe," you'd say. They'd stare at you, clutching a pinecone, blinking in envy. You walk through this history not just amused, but oddly grateful. Every scratchy solution brings you closer to understanding the comfort of now. The heated seats, the button-controlled bidets, the towering shelves of 20-roll packs. And while this might all sound hilariously primitive, don't laugh too loud. If modern plumbing ever goes down, you might find yourself eyeing that stack of junk mail in the corner with new respect. You breathe in, the air shifts. You're moving forward in time now, away from stone and sponge, towards silk and scroll. Something is about to change, and it all begins with paper. You find yourself now in the crisp mountain air of Han Dynasty China, around 100 CE. The streets are orderly, The robes are flowing, and there's a scent of ink in the breeze. Paper has just been invented, actual paper, as in flattened plant pulp, dried into thin, delicate sheets. You're watching Kai Lun, a court eunuch, mix mulberry bark, hemp waste, old rags, and water into a slurry. He presses it through a screen, lets it dry, and lifts up the first page of a technological revolution. Now don't get too excited, this isn't toilet paper yet. At this stage, it's meant for official documents, poetry, bureaucratic nonsense. But you know where it's heading. For now, paper is still precious, too rare to waste on your rear. But the idea is there, something soft, something disposable, something better than a broken tile. You shuffle through time and observe how the invention slowly changes everything. The Chinese had been using bamboo slips and silk scrolls for writing, but this new paper is cheaper, lighter, and absorbent. Guess which quality made it eventually useful in the bathroom. Fast forward a few hundred years, still in China, and you start hearing whispers of a new practice. There's a mention from an official named Yan Zhitui around 589 CE. He's very clear. I dare not use paper on which there might be written characters. That's right, people were using paper to wipe, but not if it had writing on it. A man's got standards. Historians still argue whether this was widespread or just the elite being dramatic. After all, peasants weren't penning scrolls. But this tells you something big. Paper, for the first time in human history, is being recognized as not just for ideas, but for cleanup. And cleanup was still very much needed. While Roman aqueducts and Persian gardens get all the architectural glory, ancient Chinese palaces had private latrines. Some even had running water. There's evidence of clay piping systems that funneled waste away, early signs of toilet design meeting social dignity. You imagine the court nobles, floating around in embroidered silks, clutching a square of tissue like royalty. Because they were. But it wasn't just comfort, it was also symbolic. Paper held a strange, dual power. It was sacred as writing material, but humbling in the bathroom. There's a cultural reverence for paper that even extends into modern times, burning paper offerings for the dead, folding it into lucky charms, wrapping gifts with care. And here it is, slowly finding a place in the loo. Quirkier still, some accounts suggest that wealthy households ordered paper sheets in bulk, measuring up to 2 feet by 3 feet each. That's right, your single roll of 3-inch squares would have looked laughable next to the Chinese palace stash. These weren't delicate little tissues, they were practically towels. You glance down in your imagined scene, smooth, fibrous, slightly yellowed sheets of early paper stacked beside a porcelain stool. The air smells of tea and old wood. It's quiet, refined. A far cry from the communal Roman sponge of yore. Here you get privacy, a choice, and just enough luxury to make you feel like civilization might really be worth it. But of course, this was still elite living. Most commoners were still doing what they'd always done, scraping with bamboo, rinsing with river water, patting with old cloth. Still, the precedent was set. Paper had officially entered the bathroom, and it would not be leaving. This subtle shift is what makes China's contribution to the history of toilet paper so fascinating. It's not just the invention, it's the first time anyone seriously entertained the idea that something could be made just for wiping. Not repurposed, not improvised, designed. You're standing at the edge of a new concept, hygiene with intention. And while much of this development stayed within Asia for centuries, the seeds were planted. Knowledge travels slowly, like ink soaking into paper. But travel it would. Eventually, when paper production reached the Islamic world in the 8th century and Europe by the 12th, the hygiene habits would follow, just a few hundred years behind. Historians still debate whether the paper wiping custom spread with the silk trade or independently re-emerged in other paper-producing cultures. Some argue that early Japanese scroll makers also used paper for bathroom needs, though details are frustratingly scarce. Archaeologists get few chances to confirm toilet paper use. People don't tend to leave behind labeled exhibits saying, "Used once, please do not touch." Still, the thread is there. From Kai Lun's pulp slurry to court officials, bathhouse supplies, the connection forms. The Chinese had the tech, the materials, and most importantly, the desire for a cleaner, softer solution. And it wasn't just about health. It was about refinement. You start to sense that toilet paper in its infancy is more than a convenience. It's a quiet act of self-respect. You breathe out, the scenery shifts again. The streets become narrower. Paper is starting to look more familiar. The roll doesn't exist yet, but the dream does. You're standing on the edge of mass production, on the verge of a Western world that still doesn't get it. And paper, precious, sacred, absorbent, is about to leave the libraries and enter the latrines. The air thickens with incense and bureaucracy. You're standing in the Tang Dynasty now, China, 8th century CE. The court is at its peak, bustling with poets, ministers, and enough administrative paperwork to make your modern inbox look empty. You imagine palace attendants rushing past, robes swishing, scrolls fluttering, the subtle squeak of silk slippers on polished stone. And somewhere inside this imperial machine, toilet paper. Yes, real, officially documented toilet paper. A report from 851 CE written by an Arab traveler named Du Huan describes how the Chinese do not wash themselves with water when they have done their necessities, but they only wipe themselves with paper. And while the phrasing feels a bit judgy, you know what he's referring to: actual paper, created specifically for bathroom use. It's no longer just repurposed scraps or discarded documents. This is intentional. You're inside a public bathhouse now, maybe one attached to a government complex or temple. Tidy stacks of thin sheets sit in the corner, cut uniformly, rougher than what you're used to but revolutionary for the time. The paper is soft enough to use but coarse enough to feel like it came from a tree that still holds a grudge. Historians still argue whether this was available to commoners or reserved for the elite, but records show that by the 14th century, the practice had scaled up. In 1393, an imperial supplier noted that over 720,000 sheets of toilet paper were produced annually for the emperor's household alone. For reference, that's more than 1,900 sheets per day. Either the emperor had a lot of guests, or someone was being very thorough. And it wasn't just quantity, it was quality. Another note in the same record describes an additional 15,000 sheets made extra soft and perfumed with rose water for the emperor himself. You let that sink in. Rose-scented toilet paper in the 1300s. Somewhere your modern roll blushes in embarrassment. There's something poetic about this, don't you think? In a civilization known for its art, calligraphy, and grand philosophies, they also found time to upgrade their wipe game. It wasn't seen as trivial. It was part of a balanced life. Clean body, clear mind, perfumed toilet paper. And if you tilt your head just right, this becomes more than history, it becomes intention. The idea that even your most private moments deserve a touch of grace. The emperors didn't settle for bark or hay. They demanded comfort. That demand, as strange as it sounds, helped shape the future. You stroll through the records, archivists in long robes taking careful inventory of tissues, like counting coins or gold. There's something oddly dignified about it, as if toilet paper in these halls held weight. In a corner, a servant flattens pulp onto mesh screens, drying it under the sun. It's not the high-gloss, quilted paper, you know. It's fibrous, earthy, textured with bamboo threads and maybe a few unintentional splinters. But it's uniform, predictable, manufactured, and that in its own quiet way is progress. Outside of the palace, things are still rougher. In rural villages, people continue to use cloth, rice husks, or smooth river stones. But now there's a benchmark, an idea of what's possible, and even if peasants never touched the rose-scented stuff, they knew it existed. That's how all revolutions start, with a whisper from the top. You consider what this means. Toilet paper in this time and place becomes a cultural marker, a symbol of refinement. The same way we now judge restaurants by the quality of their restroom paper, too thin, too rough, too stingy with the roll, so too did ancient courtiers quietly weigh the prestige of their wiping material. But perhaps most importantly, this was the beginning of toilet paper being made for the sake of wiping, not recycled from something else. It no longer had to apologize for its purpose. It had arrived. It would take the rest of the world several hundred more years to catch up, but China had already figured it out. And while your mind may be drifting, eyes fluttering from drowsy comfort, this quiet development should stay with you. The elegance of solving a mundane problem without fanfare. It's funny, really. We obsess over innovation in tech, space, fashion. But comfort, real comfort, starts here in the smallest spaces of daily life. A folded sheet, a private moment, a simple task made just a little easier. You breathe in. The perfumed air swirls with ink, incense, and a faint papery scent. Somewhere nearby, the emperor is content. His world is ordered, fragrant, and surprisingly modern. The timeline shifts again. You're about to leave Asia behind, where paper had flourished for centuries, and move toward a world that had yet to fall in love with the roll. A world still wiping with, well, you'll see. You step out of the serene palaces of imperial China and land with a thud in a Roman latrine. It's loud, it's communal, it's, well, wet. Stone benches line the walls, each with a neatly carved hole and no partitions. You sit down next to a senator, maybe a soldier, maybe someone who just finished a very long meal of garum-soaked fish. You nod politely. This is your life now. In front of each bench is a water channel. Floating in it, the tersorium. A long wooden stick topped with a sponge. It's communal. It's shared. And allegedly it's rinsed in vinegar or salt water between uses, allegedly. You try not to think too hard about how effective that was. The tersorium was more than just a wiping tool. It was a social equalizer, a health hazard, and possibly the world's first reusable bathroom accessory. Historians still argue whether it was truly standard issue across the empire or more of an upper-class thing. But it shows up in enough texts and mosaics that you know it wasn't rare. You imagine yourself nervously reaching for the sponge stick, eyeing your neighbor. He gives a nonchalant nod as if to say, "Hurry up, I've got dinner plans." You suddenly miss the rose-scented sheets of Section 3. Further east in ancient Japan, the chugi, a slender wooden stick used to clean oneself, makes a return appearance. Archaeological digs have uncovered them near toilets in Nara-era buildings. Think chopsticks, but for wiping. And no, not the disposable kind. Then there's the Islamic world, where cleanliness is emphasized religiously. Water is the tool of choice, left hand only, thank you very much, and public bathhouses are common. No paper yet, but perhaps more cleanliness overall than many European cities would see for centuries. There's a logic here, a respect for ritual, that makes even simple hygiene feel elevated. Meanwhile, in medieval Africa, certain tribes use smooth river stones, rinsed and reused. Some nomadic groups prefer tufts of grass or sand smoothed into clever scooping mounds. In parts of the Pacific Islands, coconut husks are the go-to, scratchy, yes, but biodegradable and plentiful. In colder regions, snow. That's right, the cleanest and coldest wipe of your life. Across the globe, people are solving the same biological riddle with whatever their environment offers. Moss, bark, woven leaves, even seashells. Native American groups in the Pacific Northwest sometimes used clam shells for scraping. You're now wondering what the return policy on that must have looked like. One particularly interesting option comes from Inuit cultures. Snow and animal fur were common. Some oral traditions even mention moss carefully dried inside seal intestine to keep it sanitary. Now that is innovation under pressure. Historians still debate which culture first introduced the idea of a designated, reusable wiping item. Was it the Japanese with their polished sticks, or the Romans and their vinegar-soaked sponge? Maybe it was the resourceful desert dwellers who fashioned leather pads just for the job. The lines blur, but the ingenuity shines through. Still, what's fascinating isn't the materials, it's the thought process. These societies weren't dirty by default. They had systems, rules. Some cultures forbade the use of the right hand. Others designated wiping stations away from living quarters. Some burned their used materials, others buried them. Others, like the early Koreans, crafted small, covered toilets with slots for the cleaning tools. Yet none of them had toilet paper as we know it. There's no soft square, no roll, no neat perforation, just whatever worked. And more often than not, it didn't work very well. But the drive was always the same: stay clean, stay dignified, stay alive. And yes, sometimes it got creative. There's a rumor, likely apocryphal, that Vikings used sheep's wool soaked in seawater. Medieval monks supposedly used pages from unwanted religious texts, maybe the only time blasphemy and hygiene intersected so literally. Again, not confirmed, but deeply amusing. You're probably itching, pun intended, to move on from this section, but don't forget what it shows you. Across every culture, through all climates and classes, people cared about this. Cared enough to invent, to adapt, to pass down knowledge and methods. That's not trivial, that's human. You walk away from the communal latrine, the polished sticks, the scratchy shells, the coconut husks. Your modern sensibilities are grateful for the passage of time. But your historian's heart knows. This messy period laid the foundation for a quieter revolution. Because soon, very soon, someone's going to look at all these scratchy tools, the wet sponges and pinecones, and say, there has got to be a better way. And when they do, everything changes. You emerge now into the twilight haze of medieval Europe, a world of drafty stone castles, smoky thatched cottages, and not nearly enough soap. The scent of damp wool and wood smoke clings to everything. And if you're hoping the hygiene gets better, well, brace yourself. It's the year 1100, give or take, and you're perched on a wide wooden bench over a hole in a tower wall. Yes, you're in a guardrobe, the original medieval and sweet. It's drafty. Cold wind whistles up your tunic. Below you, a pit, or maybe a moat. Either way, you're praying for a short stay. To wipe, you've got options, not good ones, but options. A pile of hay sits in a corner. There's some straw, maybe a rag or two if you're lucky. One account from a 16th century English manor mentions the use of sheep's wool soaked in rosewater, but don't get too excited. That was for nobles, and even then only during feasts. For everyone else, moss, leaves, or a corner of your undertunic. One unlucky French servant once used a live chicken. You don't want to talk about it. Historians still argue whether wiping was standard practice at all in rural areas. Some believe people just pulled their trousers back up and hoped the natural order of things would resolve the situation. Others argue that wiping with whatever was nearby, cabbage leaves, wood shavings, maybe a Bible page if you were feeling spicy, was more common. You wander into a monastery now where the latrines are communal, lined in stone, and usually positioned near a stream for some primitive flushing. Monks are cleaner than most, thanks to strict rules of ablution, but they too use rags or, famously, book pages from worn-out manuscripts. This wasn't just bathroom utility. It was recycling, holy recycling, technically. One hilarious yet telling record from a monastery in York details a scribe writing angrily in the margins of a religious manuscript. Do not use this page for wiping. You imagine the frustration, hours of labor, only to have it end up between someone's cheeks. Meanwhile, city dwellers are no better off. Medieval towns were dense, loud, and often ankle-deep in filth. Chamber pots were common, emptying them, less so. Some buildings had chute windows, openings where people simply tossed their waste into the alley. Gardes l'eau, they'd shout in French, meaning watch out for the water. You don't need to be fluent to get the message. But here's something unexpected. Despite the grime, there were attempts, clumsy, well-intentioned, often hilarious, to stay clean. Rich women carried toilet cloths in their purses. Apothecaries sold scented rags. Some bathhouses offered a primitive wipe and wash service for an extra coin. You marvel at the idea of walking into a public bath and saying, "Just the wipe today, please." And bathhouses were controversial. In some parts of Europe, they were banned due to moral panic. Too many naked people, too much mingling. In other places, like Germany and the Netherlands, they thrived. Communal, steamy, slightly chaotic, but undeniably cleaner than the average English farmstead. Still, there's no toilet paper, not even close. And it's not for lack of paper. Parchment existed, as did rough forms of linen paper, but wiping with something so expensive, you'd sooner use your shoe, and in fact, some did. Quirkier still, a few castles featured double-seater toilets, side-by-side openings for, let's say, multitasking. You glance sideways at your imaginary noble companion, both of you trying not to make eye contact. "Nice weather today," he mutters. "Indeed," you reply, staring at the wall, praying for invisibility. If there was any organized system of wiping, it was lost to time or buried in layers of euphemism. Medieval people didn't write about these things directly. Their letters talk about absolutions and cleansing of the body, but never quite name the thing we're naming now. You wonder, was everyone just pretending this wasn't happening? And yet, even amid the mess, the desire for some form of personal care remained. We found tools in medieval digs, wooden sticks, rags, even bundles of twigs tied like a brush. These may have been used for washing or for wiping. We can't say for sure, but someone made them, someone cared. It's easy to laugh at all this now, from your warm bathroom lit by LED bulbs and scented with eucalyptus. But the Middle Ages weren't backward, they were just under-equipped. Paper was too precious. Water was risky, and ideas about cleanliness were tangled with theology and fear. Cleanliness wasn't next to godliness yet. It was somewhere down the hall, behind superstition and seasonal pestilence. You step back into the present of this section, shaking off the itch of straw and the faint smell of old wool. Medieval hygiene was improvisational and painfully inconsistent. But in the creaks of the guardrobe door and the scribbled fury of a monk defending his manuscript, you see something taking shape. The need for dignity, the craving for softness, the possibility that one day, maybe just maybe, someone will invent something designed for this purpose. And when they do, a new age begins. You take a deep breath of wood smoke and peat, and then, bam, you're somewhere completely different. A log cabin, snow drifting gently outside, a cast-iron stove hissing in the corner. Welcome to early America. Here, personal hygiene isn't about refinement, it's about resourcefulness. And when nature calls, you reach for whatever's nearby, and I do mean whatever. Your first option, corn cobs, that's right. Dried, dekerneled, rough as the day is long, used widely throughout rural 18th and 19th century America, especially in the South and the frontier regions. The cob was reusable, durable, and this is key, biodegradable. You try not to imagine the logistics, but let's just say it involved a bucket of lye or ash water and some extremely thick skin. The second option, newspapers, or better yet the Sears Roebuck Catalog, a mail-order shopping Bible that doubled as bathroom tissue in countless outhouses across the United States. Its thin pages, abundance, and the fact that it arrived free made it the preferred choice in farmsteads and homesteads alike. And when glossy pages replaced the newsprint, there was public outcry. You can picture someone shouting, "You can't wipe with color photos, Sears." Historians still argue whether people actually read the catalog before repurposing it. Some say yes, others claim it was too precious to waste until a new edition arrived. One particularly amusing anecdote describes a farmer who always tore out the political section first. "No better use for it," he grumbled. You're standing in a creaky one-room outhouse now. A spider dangles in the corner. Moonlight filters through a knothole. A loop of string holds crumpled newspaper squares on a nail. There's no flush, no privacy, just you, a wooden seat, and last week's headlines. It's humbling. And yet this period is strangely pivotal. For the first time, Americans start to think about hygiene as a daily expectation, not a luxury. The rise of printed material makes paper more available. And as industrialization begins, so does the mass production of pulp, and the eventual idea that maybe, just maybe, wiping shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all experience. Still, for decades, the idea of paper designed specifically for the toilet was a punchline. People laughed at it. Literally. A 19th century comic strip mocks the idea of fancy bottom rags as something only fussy city folk would need. But things were changing, slowly. Indoor plumbing began to spread in wealthier parts of the East Coast. With it came ceramic toilets, running water, and a sudden problem, clogging. Turns out not all paper is created equal. Glossy catalog pages were too tough. Fabric rags, worse. People needed something soft, absorbent, and flushable. In short, they needed toilet paper. They just didn't know it yet. You lean against a barrel of apple cider and overhear a conversation in a general store. Someone's grumbling about using catalog pages that don't soak up nothing. Another swears by corn husks. The shopkeeper just sighs and mutters, "I hear in the city they got paper for that now." And indeed they did, but we're not quite there yet. Quirkier methods persisted too. In mining towns, people used gunny sacks or bits of felted wool. On the Great Plains, prairie grass, carefully folded to avoid paper cuts. In the Deep South, catalog companies caught on and started pre-puncturing their booklets so people could hang them more easily. That's right. Sears leaned into the market. But no matter how resourceful or rugged these methods were, they had one thing in common: they weren't made for wiping. They were stand-ins, substitutes, good enough, but never ideal. Which is why, when the first official toilet paper did arrive, it wasn't greeted with excitement. It was met with skepticism. You picture the first rolls sitting dusty on store shelves while the locals clutch their corn husks like treasured heirlooms. Old habits die hard, especially the ones that are, well, deeply personal. And yet, bit by bit, the culture was primed for a shift. Indoor plumbing was growing. Urban populations were swelling. People were starting to want a little more comfort, a little less scratch, maybe something soft. You close the outhouse door gently and walk back into the dimly lit farmhouse. Someone's humming in the kitchen. A newspaper rustles. A child is ripping a page from the middle. You know exactly where that page's journey ends. Comfort was coming, but before it could arrive, someone had to convince the world that wiping with purpose-made paper wasn't ridiculous. It was the future. And as strange as it sounds, that convincing was just around the corner. A man with an idea, a medicated promise, a sheet of paper that finally said, "This is what I'm for." You step now into the gaslit streets of 1857 New York City, the air thick with coal smoke and ambition. Cobblestone rattles under your boots, and a newspaper boy yells about the latest scandal involving a steamboat, a senator, or possibly a sausage. The city is alive, and so is your digestive system. Which brings you to a man named Joseph Gaiety. Joseph is not a flashy inventor. He doesn't dazzle like Edison or fly kites in storms like Franklin. No, Joseph has a more humble mission to change the way Americans think about wiping, and not with corncobs. Gaiety debuts something revolutionary. Gaiety's medicated paper, flat sheets infused with aloe, designed specifically for personal hygiene. Each one is printed with his name. That's right. Every square says Joseph Gaiety, like an autograph for your most private moments. You're in a Victorian apothecary now, warm from the gas lamps and vaguely lemon-scented. A display near the counter offers Gaiety's product, a neat box of stacked sheets. The packaging promises relief from piles, the Victorian term for hemorrhoids, and cleanliness you can trust. One ad calls it the greatest necessity of the age. But society isn't quite ready. Historians still argue whether Gaiety's paper failed because of price, culture, or just bad timing. One sheet cost about a cent, which wasn't outrageous. But remember, this was still the era of free newspaper wiping. Hard to compete with free. The real problem? Embarrassment. Most Americans didn't want to buy a product labeled for the nether regions. Imagine walking into a shop, locking eyes with the clerk, and saying, "One box of your finest bottom paper, please." Gaiety tried to market it as a health item, but the social stigma stuck harder than his aloe sheets. And then came a quirky twist, fraudulent copies. That's right. Other companies started ripping off his idea, selling medicated paper under his name without paying him a dime. Joseph sued. He fought. He insisted on the dignity of his invention. But the damage was done. By the late 1870s, his product was fading and Gaiety himself had become a footnote, an absorbent whisper in the annals of hygiene. Still, his idea lingered. And the timing couldn't have been more perfect. America was industrializing. Cities were ballooning. Paper mills were booming. And bathrooms, they were moving indoors. With that came plumbing, and with plumbing came pipes that couldn't handle corncobs. You find yourself now in a bustling paper factory somewhere in the American Midwest. Machines clatter and hiss. The smell of wood pulp is sharp in your nose. Stacks of soft, uncut paper are hauled past you. But this isn't office stock. It's destined for something far more personal. In 1871, a man named Zeth Wheeler patents perforated toilet paper rolls. Yes, the roll at last. And by the 1890s, the Scott Paper Company enters the stage. They sell TP to hotels and department stores under brand labels, quietly dodging consumer squeamishness by not putting their own name on the product. Clever, right? Historians still debate whether this hands-off branding approach helped Scott succeed where Gaiety stumbled. It's likely. By keeping the paper anonymous, it could be treated as just another household item, not an embarrassing indulgence. The shame of buying toilet paper slowly began to fade. Even so, the early versions were rough. Literally, the paper was often recycled and prone to splinters. Yes, you read that right, splinters. One of the first major marketing campaigns for TP in the 20th century focused entirely on splinter-free guarantees. You imagine the ad meetings. We've got to emphasize softness and survival. You stroll through a general store in 1900. On the shelf next to baking soda and cough syrup sits a new kind of roll. It's plain. No aloe, no name, just practicality. You pick it up. It's thin, dry, but it's here, and people are buying it. Wiping was no longer about making do. It was about expectation. Gaiety may not have lived to see his vision fully accepted, but his medicated sheets were the blueprint. The aloe didn't survive. The signature disappeared, but the concept, that stuck. And it started to roll, pun very much intended. By the end of this era, toilet paper had gone from taboo to tolerable. It had a seat at the table, or at least a spot in the water closet, and soon people wouldn't just want it, they'd need it. Daily. Religiously. You smile as you walk through history's quietest revolution. No fireworks, no marches, just a man with a box of aloe paper insisting, "We deserve better." He was right. The machines are louder now. You're in a 1910s factory surrounded by conveyor belts, wooden gears, and a near-constant hiss of steam. Everything is fast, loud, mechanical. And at the far end of the floor, reams of paper are being spooled into rolls, soft, white, and dotted with tiny perforated lines. Toilet paper has entered its next era. You're watching workers from the Albany Perforated Wrapping Paper Company, later known as Scott Paper, create the modern TP roll in earnest. These aren't the stacked, aloe-soaked sheets of Gaiety's time. These are smooth, continuous rolls, trimmed and chopped, each square defined by a perforation. That gentle rip, that tug-and-tear rhythm, it starts here. The branding, still hush-hush. Scott sells its toilet paper to hotels and pharmacies under house brands, so the company's name stays comfortably disconnected from the act of wiping. It's like a hygiene ghostwriter, discreet, essential, uncredited. But the real genius wasn't in the paper, it was in marketing. By the 1920s, Scott begins to shift its strategy. They lean into a new pitch, hygiene. Cleanliness becomes a public virtue. Doctors begin talking about germs. Housewives are bombarded with messages about modern living. The bathroom isn't just a necessity, it's a moral imperative. And what's more modern than a dedicated roll of soft, splinter-free toilet paper? Now imagine a grocery store aisle, tin cans on one side, soaps on the other, and in the middle, a modest cardboard box filled with rolls of Waldorf tissue. Scott's flagship brand, it doesn't scream, it doesn't blush. It just sits there, calm and clinical. Historians still argue whether this was the true turning point, whether Scott's choice to normalize toilet paper through quiet, respectable branding changed American hygiene forever. One thing's certain, the splinter wars were real. Yes, splinters, the dark, pointy secret of early toilet paper. Back then, wood pulp processing wasn't refined. You weren't wiping with paper, you were wiping with hazards. Consumer complaints mounted. Painful, rough, unholy. And Scott saw an opportunity. They launched a campaign touting their product as splinter-free. Imagine that slogan on today's packaging. Not ultra-soft, not with lotion, just won't stab you. And people responded. Comfort mattered, safety mattered. Suddenly, toilet paper was no longer embarrassing, it was smart, responsible, even stylish. You drift into a 1930s bathroom now. It's tiled in mint green. There's a tiny window, a porcelain sink, and next to the toilet, a shiny new chrome holder, dispensing the world's gentlest miracle in one square at a time. It's not luxurious, but it's expected. The over or under debate begins here. The proper way to hang your roll becomes a subtle war of etiquette, one still raging a century later. Over is correct, by the way. The original patent drawing proves it, just saying. And while Americans were just beginning to embrace the concept, the rest of the world remained skeptical. In parts of Europe, bidets were the gold standard. In Japan, chugi had evolved into early washlets. In India and much of the Middle East, water remained the go-to. Even today, more than 70% of the world doesn't use toilet paper as their primary method. It's a Western fascination, arguably even a luxury good. Yet in the US, it's spreading fast, literally and figuratively. By the 1940s, brands like Northern Tissue and Charmin enter the scene, offering velvety softness and luxury rolls. That's when things get personal. Comfort becomes the battleground. Quilting, patterns, subtle perfumes, ply count escalation. Suddenly it's not about if you have toilet paper, it's how soft it is. 2-ply, 3. Are you a single-ply peasant or a triple-ply aristocrat? One quirky ad from the 1950s even promises toilet paper that won't embarrass you when guests visit. Because yes, apparently, hosting a dinner party could be derailed by low-quality TP. You walk through these decades like a ghost, watching bathroom cabinets fill with increasingly elaborate rolls. Colored paper, blush pink, powder blue, mint green, matching the tiles, matching the towels, matching the era. And yet beneath all that fluff, the core idea holds. Toilet paper is no longer strange. It's standard, and marketing made it so. From splinter-free to cloud-soft, from rough-cut rolls to cushiony 1,000-sheet behemoths, the product evolves. And every brand tells a story. Scott is reliable, Charmin is playful, Cottonelle is luxurious. Each offers not just paper, but comfort, a little slice of personal indulgence. But as the brands rise, so does competition. Roll wars, price wars. And behind it all, a growing consumer realization. Comfort is negotiable, price not so much. Still, by the mid-20th century, the roll has won. It's in every hotel, every school, every airplane. There's no turning back. And you, standing in the middle of a supermarket aisle in 1965, watch as a mother debates between two brands, holding each one like it might whisper the secret of domestic perfection. You smile. You know something she doesn't. The next phase, it won't be about softness, it'll be about culture. And before long, toilet paper will leave the bathroom and find its way into jokes, commercials, Halloween pranks, and even art. But first, one more shortage, one more panic, One more global event to remind us just how dependent we've become on the humblest roll. You're standing in a living room now, circa 1972. There's shag carpet beneath your feet and mustard yellow wallpaper on the walls. The television flickers in the corner, and suddenly, there it is. A bear, cartoonish, smiling, selling toilet paper. This is the era when toilet paper stops being shy. It starts to strut, and it all begins with a quest for softness. You know the kind, adds that whisper cloud-like comfort, rolls wrapped in babies, puppies, or clouds. The product isn't just clean, it's cozy. You're not buying paper, you're buying a hug, the kind that promises you're behind the pampering it deserves. Enter Charmin with Mr. Whipple. Remember him, the grumpy grocery store manager who constantly scolded customers with, "Please don't squeeze the Charmin." He became a cultural icon, ran for over 20 years. The idea, toilet paper, was now so soft you couldn't help but touch it, even if it wasn't yours. Historians still argue whether Mr. Whipple's popularity actually boosted sales or just made toilet paper commercials socially acceptable. Either way, it worked. By the late 70s, softness was the standard. Not a luxury, not an upgrade, a right. You drift through a supermarket aisle, watching as brands battle with emotional appeals. Northern Tissue goes maternal with caring softness. Cottonelle markets its thick and absorbent ripples. The names get fluffier, the paper puffier. One ad even features a mother gently dabbing her baby's face with a sheet of TP, as if to say, "See, it's practically a skincare product." You know better, but you're impressed. Toilet paper is no longer about shame. It's about pleasure. It's the dawn of multiply warfare. Brands race to out-soft, out-absorb, out-quilt each other. One roll promises the strength of 1,000 brawny lumberjacks and the touch of an angel's wing. Another flaunts its micro-cushions like luxury bedding. Consumers start comparing softness levels the way they would compare thread counts. And it works, sales soar. People start stocking extra rolls. The bathroom becomes a space for indulgence. Candles, plants, soft towels, and of course the plushest TP money can buy. But softness has a dark side. By the 1990s, environmentalists begin to raise concerns. All that cushy comfort? It comes at a cost: trees, old-growth forests, water-intensive bleaching, plastic-wrapped packaging. The same rolls we clutch for comfort are now flagged as wasteful, even destructive. You're holding a 3-ply mega roll, and suddenly it feels heavier than expected. That's when eco-friendly toilet paper steps into the spotlight. Brands like Seventh Generation and Who Gives a Crap, yes, really start offering recycled, unbleached, bamboo-based alternatives. The packaging is minimal. The message, soft enough, guilt-free. You notice how different it feels, less fluffy, sure, but also lighter. Morally, anyway. Historians still debate whether the shift toward eco-conscious TP is a trend or a tipping point. The modern consumer is torn, comfort versus conscience. And the aisle gets more complicated. You now choose not just by ply or brand, but by carbon footprint. Softness versus sustainability. Even the roll size escalates. Regular, jumbo, mega, ultra mega. Forever roll, that one literally comes with its own metal dispenser. You start to wonder if the next innovation is just handing people tree trunks with perforations. But this isn't just excess, it's about ritual. You walk into homes and see spare rolls arranged in baskets like decorative orbs. You visit boutique hotels that fold the first square into neat triangles. In Japan, smart toilets spritz and sing, yet the paper still waits loyally beside them. Toilet paper, humble as it is, has become a constant, a symbol, an object of trust. And with that trust comes anxiety. In 1973, Johnny Carson makes a joke on The Tonight Show about a possible toilet paper shortage. Americans panic. Stores sell out in hours. The first modern toilet paper run. No real shortage existed until everyone believed one did. It's a lesson you file away for later. Because while softness is the battle of the 20th century, scarcity will define the next. Still, here you are wandering a drugstore in the late 90s. Music plays overhead. Rows of rolls stare back at you, some plush, some plain, some pretending to be scented lavender fields. You grab your brand, you head home, you don't even think about it. But you will. Soon the world will change again, and so will the way you see this humble roll. The world quiets, then jerks forward again, only now it's spinning at the speed of satellites and 24-hour news cycles. It's the early 21st century. We've got smartphones, streaming services, and an increasing inability to remember life before Wi-Fi. But through it all, your old friend remains, the toilet paper roll. You're strolling through a modern factory now. Vast, humming, air-conditioned. Robotic arms pivot in perfect choreography. Giant spools of soft, bleached pulp unroll into wide streams, sliced, embossed, quilted, and rolled at a pace that would have made gaiety faint. A single plant can crank out 1 million rolls a day, and during peak demand, even more. Modern manufacturing has made TP a marvel. Think multi-stage filtration, bleaching, texturing, and ply bonding so precise it could probably pass the SATs. One machine crimps the edges to help the first square tier evenly. Another embosses a baby bear because you need to see softness as much as you feel it. Toilet paper is now a science. Engineers optimize it for absorbency, tensile strength, and roll density. Some brands experiment with lotions, aloe vera, or cooling gels. Others develop silent unrolling for those shy about their acoustics. You smile. You've come far from the haystack of medieval Europe. And this science is everywhere. In luxury hotels, you find rolls so thick they might qualify as furniture. In budget motels, you're reacquainted with the dreaded single ply, thin as air, sharp as judgment. Even in airplanes, you notice the roll shrinking, coarsening, humbled by altitude. Still, TP remains a cultural anchor. In pop culture, toilet paper becomes a visual punchline. It's tossed in Halloween pranks, mummifies suburban trees, flies across movie screens in slow motion. Cartoons give it arms and a face. Kids make crafts from the empty tubes. It becomes a symbol of absurdity, reliability, and oddly enough, wealth. Yes, wealth. In post-war Germany, rolls of toilet paper were considered valuable enough to serve as barter currency. In some Venezuelan markets during economic collapse, it became more sought after than money itself. You picture a street vendor whispering, 3 apples or 1 roll. Historians still debate whether TP's symbolism is unique or simply the byproduct of its omnipresence. After all, it's one of the few products every household stocks in bulk, handles daily, and fears running out of. It's part utility, part comfort blanket. And then 2020. You hear the buzz before the panic. The headlines start softly, new virus, travel bans, rising cases. And then, inexplicably, toilet paper becomes the face of crisis. Shelves empty in hours, fistfights break out over 12 packs. Security guards are posted near the Charmin display. News anchors try to explain it. It's symbolic, they say. People want control. But you know the truth. The world is scary, the rules are changing, and that roll, soft, simple, familiar, is safe. It becomes the meme of the year. Photos of barren shelves flood social media. DIY TP alternatives trend on TikTok. Late-night hosts joke about using coffee filters. But behind the laughter is something raw, the fear of being unprepared. You're in a grocery store now, March 2020. A woman stands in front of the empty aisle, staring at the shelf like it might magically refill. She holds a list. She crosses off toilet paper. Her pen shakes. And in that moment, TP isn't just a convenience. It's a lifeline. Toilet paper manufacturers scramble. Plants go into 24-hour shifts. Logistics companies reroute deliveries. Online stores ration supply. One CEO is quoted saying, "We're not running out of product, we're running out of places to put it." Turns out people didn't need more TP. They just needed reassurance. And that's what the roll had become. A quiet promise that life would go on. That no matter what, you'd have control over something, even if it's just 2-ply comfort during a global meltdown. Eventually, supply stabilizes, the aisle refills, people stop panic buying, start laughing again. The moment passes, but the memory, it lingers. Historians still argue whether this was toilet paper's finest hour or its weirdest. Maybe both. It became a symbol of fragility and absurdity, but also of humanity. Because in the face of chaos, we reached for softness. Now you stroll through a post-pandemic world. There's more variety than ever. Bamboo rolls, subscription boxes, rolls with messages printed on them. One company even offers artisanal TP, crafted in small batches with ethically sourced pulp. You suppress a giggle. Still, the roll remains humble, practical, unchanging in shape and purpose. One of the few things that has stayed the same, even as everything else shifted. You pause. 1 roll, 1 need, 1 million stories. The next time you reach for a square, maybe you'll remember this. Behind every pull is a legacy. Ancient sponges, bamboo sticks, corncobs, inventors, bears, panics, punchlines. It's not just paper. It's history. You're in a studio audience now. There's laughter, applause, and a brightly lit stage. A comedian is mid-joke. And then I said, don't forget to buy toilet paper. She comes home with tissues and a confused look. Tissues, do I look like a Victorian ghost? Toilet paper has officially entered pop culture. It's in sitcoms, stand-up routines, movie gags. It hangs from trees in teen comedies, rolls down hallways in kids' films, and makes surprise cameos in viral videos involving cats. You've even seen it in cartoons, bandaging mummies and acting out dramatic scenes with googly eyes. How did we get here? Back in the 1970s and 80s, advertising laid the groundwork. The Charmin Bears, those fluffy, animated mascots with their forest home and unrelenting obsession with softness, become a symbol of both comfort and absurdity. Kids love them. Adults roll their eyes, but everyone remembers the jingle. And Mr. Whipple, he's still around. By the time he retired from television, he'd appeared in over 500 commercials, making him one of the most recognizable faces in advertising history. That's right. A man whose sole job was to shame people for squeezing toilet paper became a cultural icon. Historians still argue whether this level of branding brilliance helped normalize toilet paper or simply made us more obsessed with it. Either way, the line between necessity and personality had been crossed. You flip through TV channels. A prank show features someone replacing TP with sandpaper. Laughter. A rom-com features a character making a desperate midnight run to the store for the good kind. Relatable. A music video flashes a bathroom scene where the toilet paper has been hung the wrong way. Scandal. And it's not just humor. Artists have started using TP as a medium. Sculptures, installations. One gallery features a life-sized wedding dress made entirely from rolls. The fragility is part of the message. Comfort, waste, luxury, tangled together. There's even competitive art. The toilet paper wedding dress contest. Yes, it's real. Offers thousands in prize money for couture gowns made exclusively from TP, glue, and thread. Imagine explaining that to ancient Romans and their sponge sticks. You walk through a college dorm now. The whiteboard says Party Friday, and the hallway smells like instant noodles and regret. Someone's door is wrapped in TP like a mummy. A prank. A rite of passage. A message that says, we have no money, but we have spirit. Toilet paper has become shorthand. For humor, for comfort, for chaos. Even in literature, it appears. Douglas Adams joked that the single most useful thing in the galaxy wasn't a towel, it was toilet paper. Stephen King has characters hoarding it before storms. And in The Office, it's part of one of Jim's iconic pranks, turning Dwight's desk into a TP sculpture. But perhaps its most powerful pop culture moment? The meme. You remember the image. March 2020, a man pushing a cart stacked sky-high with mega packs. The caption, he knows something we don't. Suddenly, everyone is joking about toilet paper. Memes flood the internet. 2020 starter pack includes a roll. Zombie apocalypse prep list features an aisle of TP circled in red. It's absurd, hilarious, and just a little tragic. Toilet paper became the shorthand for panic, for irrational fear, for our collective desire to do something when nothing else made sense. And because we couldn't fight a virus or fix a supply chain, we bought toilet paper. Lots of it. Quirkier still, brands leaned in. Charmin launched a Twitter account tweeting bear-themed jokes and bathroom humor. One tweet simply read, "We're trying to roll with it." People laughed, some cried, but they followed. Toilet paper had followers now. And let's not forget Halloween. For decades, rolls of toilet paper have been the ultimate prank weapon. Lightweight, aerodynamic, highly visible. You remember the feeling, late night, a daring throw, watching that white arc unfurl through the moonlight to land across a neighbor's tree. Mischief, immortality, and regret rolled into one. You pause at a YouTube channel where someone's making TP origami, a lotus flower perched atop a hotel bathroom roll. Impress your guests, the voiceover whispers, or just impress yourself. Because that's the thing, toilet paper is now everywhere. Not just in bathrooms, in jokes, in symbolism, in fashion and art and marketing. It's been humanized, memeified, and elevated. And yet it remains what it's always been, a quiet companion, one you reach for in private, one you never brag about, One that's always there until one day it's not and you panic. You chuckle drifting past a pop art painting of a gleaming roll suspended in a golden frame. The title, Necessity Number 2, naturally. Toilet paper has transcended its function. It's now a character in our cultural narrative, a role with personality, a soft-spoken punchline. And in a way, that's comforting, because if we can laugh about this, about that, then maybe we're doing okay. Maybe we're human after all. You're standing at the edge of a new aisle, sleek, minimalist, whisper quiet. This isn't your grandmother's supermarket anymore. It's lined with recycled cardboard boxes printed in neutral tones, lowercase fonts, and the occasional quirky name like Who Gives a Crap or Real. That's right. Welcome to the eco-conscious toilet paper revolution. It began as a whisper. A few fringe companies offering brown paper rolls made from recycled materials. A little stiffer, sure. A little thinner, maybe. But they came with a promise, less guilt. Because by now we all know the truth. That luxuriously soft, cloud-fluffed triple-ply roll, it costs more than money. It costs forests, water, energy, trees some a century old shredded into pulp for a few seconds of softness. And that's not even counting the bleach, the plastic wrap, the cross-country shipping. That quilted roll is a comfort, yes, but also a tiny environmental crisis. So you reach for a box labeled 100% bamboo. The packaging boasts rapid regrowth, zero dyes, and a cute koala cartoon giving a thumbs up. It feels responsible. Historians still argue whether the eco-TP movement is here to stay or just a well-marketed blip in a larger sustainability trend. But the numbers are growing. In cities across the world, people are ditching plushness for principles. You take a sheet, it's thinner, no fragrance, a little crinkle in the fold, but you feel oddly proud. This new generation of toilet paper isn't just about the wipe, it's about the why. Why this brand? Why this material? Why this carbon footprint? You've entered the age of conscious hygiene. But not everyone's convinced. You step into a suburban household where a dad is holding two rolls, his usual name brand Ultra Plush and his teenager's new eco roll. He raises an eyebrow. This one feels like sandpaper, he says. Are we really saving the planet if my butt is miserable? A fair question, one echoed across bathroom debates everywhere. The truth is the transition hasn't been seamless. Some eco-rolls lack the strength, others disintegrate too quickly. And then there's the price. Green guilt doesn't come cheap. One recycled roll can cost twice as much as a standard one. And during economic downturns, people tend to choose their wallets over their ethics. But still, the trend builds. Bamboo grows in popularity. Recycled pulp makes a comeback. Companies release carbon offset reports. Some go plastic-free. Others plant a tree for every box sold. It's a marketing jungle, sure, but the intent is real. You visit a college campus where students have started a toilet paper collective, an initiative to replace every dorm roll with sustainable stock. Their slogan? Wipe with purpose. You smirk. You respect the hustle. Then you hear about family cloth, a fringe movement of people replacing disposable toilet paper with washable cloth squares. Used, rinsed, washed, reused. Over and over. It's not new, cloth wiping existed for centuries, but now it's back with Pinterest boards and linen patterns. The phrase zero waste is whispered like a benediction. You pause, consider your own comfort zone. Not everyone is ready for cloth, or bamboo, or anything that requires an adjustment. And yet more people are trying. Bidets are booming. Sales of electric and manual bidet attachments skyrocket in the wake of the 2020 panic buying spree. People realize that water, not paper, might just be the future of personal hygiene. In Japan, this future is already normal. Bidet toilets sing lullabies, mist your seat, and dry your skin with a gentle breeze. You feel like you've entered the restroom of a spaceship, and next to the control panel, a roll of toilet paper, still there, still loyal. Because no matter how advanced the technology, no matter how committed the sustainability mission, paper remains. It's tactile, trustworthy, familiar, a backup plan in a world that changes too fast. You're in a high-rise apartment now, looking at a bathroom shelf filled with choices. Bamboo, recycled, plush, quilted, pink, plain, scented, raw. Each roll tells a story. Each choice sends a message. You think back to the corncob, the sponge stick, the hay pile in a medieval garderobe. Would they believe this moment? Would they understand why softness mattered, or why someone might choose less softness for the sake of the planet? You'll never know, but you smile. Because the roll has evolved, not just in material, but in meaning, from tool to status symbol, from taboo to trend, from luxury to lifestyle. And somewhere in a quiet factory, a new box of ethically sourced toilet paper rolls off the line, bound for a home that cares just a little more than it did yesterday. That's not just evolution. That's progress. You're standing in a quiet bathroom now. It's familiar, modern. Brushed metal fixtures, soft lighting, a light lavender scent from the reed diffuser near the sink. There's a subtle hum from the vent, and resting in its chrome cradle is a perfectly placed roll of toilet paper, flap neatly folded, triangle pointing outward like a tiny flag of civility. Toilet paper has settled into the background of our lives, but don't be fooled, it's still evolving. You reflect on 2020, the year TP took center stage in a world full of uncertainty. That frantic dash to stock up, it wasn't just about need, it was about control. In a world where invisible dangers lurked on doorknobs and breath, toilet paper was something tangible. Something you could hold, hoard, and hug if necessary. Memes immortalized it, stand-up routines unpacked it, and soon after the post-TP panic era began, manufacturers raced to respond. Warehouses expanded, suppliers diversified, brands shifted tone. You may not have noticed it, but the entire logistics industry pivoted to make sure you never stared at an empty roll again. Historians still argue whether this pivot was a temporary overreaction or the dawn of a new normal in consumer psychology. Either way, the shelves stayed full, and that was the point. And now, there's a new kind of tension. The comfort versus sustainability debate has matured into full-blown consumer identity wars. Walk down a modern supermarket aisle, and you're not just buying paper, you're making a statement. Are you a soft, quilted loyalist who insists on name brands and the decadent plushness of three-ply tissue? Or are you a bamboo minimalist, clutching your beige-wrapped, no-logo, subscription-delivered, carbon-neutral bundle like a badge of moral superiority? Or maybe you're somewhere in between, picking your rolls like you pick your coffee, half for the label, half for the lifestyle. The aisle becomes a microcosm of who we want to be, hygienic, yes, but also thoughtful, responsible, maybe even cool. And in the background, tech quietly advances. Yes, smart toilet paper is now a thing. One brand offers roll sensors that alert your phone when the bathroom stock is low. Another features biometric dispensers in public spaces to reduce waste. 1 square per scan, it boasts, smiling ominously. Hotels begin using scent-activated rolls that release fragrance when unfurled. You roll your eyes, you know it's a gimmick, but you're also kind of curious. Meanwhile, bidets continue to gain ground. Clean, efficient, less wasteful. In some cities, bidet attachment sales now rival TP. TikTok influencers swear by them. Instagram moms post side-by-side comparisons. Reddit threads break down nozzle pressure like car specs. And yet the roll remains. Even in homes with smart toilets and gentle jets, the paper still waits. Not as a necessity, but as a comfort, a finishing touch, a final swipe of familiarity. You walk into a small-town general store. A cat sleeps on the counter. Wooden shelves line the walls. Near the back, in between light bulbs and laundry soap, there's a rack of plain white rolls. No logos, no marketing, just paper. And you realize something. Toilet paper is the great equalizer. Whether you live in a Manhattan high-rise or a Wyoming cabin, whether your bathroom is touchless and voice-activated or warmed by a wood stove and a cracked mirror, you need this roll. It crosses income, culture, class. It appears in stockrooms, office closets, glove compartments, and backpacks. It's handed out in humanitarian aid packages, stored in bunkers, packed in earthquake kits. No other product is so intimate and yet so universally essential. Even astronauts, they have it. NASA once spent years developing zero-gravity toilet paper systems, complete with airflow suction to keep things tidy in orbit. Because gravity may change, but the need never does. Quirky as it seems, toilet paper has become more than functional. It's ritualistic. You reach for it without thinking, replace the roll instinctively, fold the corner absent-mindedly. It's not just a habit, it's a language, a rhythm of modern life so ingrained it disappears. And in its silence, it says so much. About privilege, about care, about how far we've come, from the Roman sponge to the smart roll sensor, from the communal tersorium to the personal 12-pack. It reflects our obsession with cleanliness, our relationship to shame, our need for control, especially in chaos. And maybe, just maybe, it reflects a small part of who we are. Because behind every role is a choice: comfort or sustainability, privacy or practicality, softness or conscience. And every now and then it makes headlines. It stirs debates. It reveals truths we didn't know we were hiding. But mostly it just waits, quietly ready to serve. And you, standing in your bathroom in the early light, don't even realize you're reaching for history. You're in a museum now, not the Louvre, not the Met, but something more intimate. A small, curated space tucked between a postal exhibit and a display on 20th century appliances. The sign above reads, "The Private History of Toilet Paper." You smirk. It's quiet, humble, almost apologetic. But step closer and you see, this isn't a joke. Inside the glass case is a timeline. A bamboo chugi from Japan. A Roman tersorium. A shredded catalog page. A box of Gaiety's medicated sheets, yellowed with age but proud in presentation. Beside it, a velvet-covered display pillow cradles the first roll of perforated toilet paper from the Albany Company, elegant, understated, slightly frayed at the edge. You're not just observing hygiene tools, you're witnessing a cultural mirror. Toilet paper, it turns out, doesn't just clean you, it reflects you. Or rather us, society, the values we quietly carry into the most private moments. Historians still debate whether toilet paper is a product of our obsession with sanitation or a symptom of something deeper. Our discomfort with the body, with waste, with the idea that we are natural creatures trying desperately to pretend otherwise. One theory suggests our preference for softness and discretion speaks to a larger Western inclination, cleanliness as a form of control. You think about that? In many cultures, water remains supreme. Bidets are praised for hygiene, environmentalists tout their efficiency. But in America and much of the Western world, TP is still king. Why? Perhaps it's about independence. No plumbing, no electricity, no problem, just you, a roll, and your dignity intact. But that dignity is layered. Think about how we teach children to use toilet paper. The moment is framed not just as necessity, but as a rite of passage. Wipe properly. Don't use too much. Don't forget to flush. It's a small performance of control, of maturity, a tiny badge of societal belonging. And for the elderly or the disabled, toilet paper becomes a test of independence. Can you still manage it? Can you still perform this basic, private ritual? When that's gone, it's not just about hygiene, it's about identity. You step into a nursing home bathroom, quiet and sanitized. There's a raised toilet, grab bars, a padded seat, and on the wall, a large, easy-tier roll, thoughtfully placed. The softness matters, yes, but so does the symbolism. It's not just about wiping, it's about autonomy. Even gender plays a role. Studies have shown that women use significantly more toilet paper than men, not just because of anatomy, but because of expectation. Cleanliness, presentation, smell. These unspoken pressures play out in every square unrolled. And class? Oh, it's in the brand names. You walk into a bathroom with off-brand, industrial-grade single-ply, and it says something very different than a gleaming pyramid of lavender-scented, ultra-cushioned triple-ply. Toilet paper has become a social indicator, like handbags or mattresses, quiet, unspoken, but present. Even the roll direction, over or under, is a kind of household philosophy. Are you a rule follower, a chaos embracer, a triangle folder, a corner crusher? All these tiny choices pile up into personality, into identity, and somehow they all trace back to a roll of paper. You glance back at the museum case and you see something else now. The items aren't just old, they're echoes. The Roman sponge says share. The medieval cloth says survive. Gaiety's box says improve. The mega roll says prepare. The bamboo pack says reconsider. And you stand there quietly, reading the unspoken messages in tissue and pulp. It hits you then gently. This object, this daily tool, has touched nearly every human life on the planet. More than coins, more than books, more than forks. It has seen every crisis, every comfort, every country, from palaces to prisons, from war zones to weddings, from cradles to coffins. You walk through time and space, through outhouses and bidets, through gold-plated dispensers and roll-less smart toilets. And at every turn, TP adapts. It follows our values. It absorbs our fears. It quietly evolves with us. That's not just a utility. That's a barometer of civilization. You exit the museum exhibit into a bathroom, not grand, not elegant. Just yours, home, a ceramic holder, a single roll. Flap gently resting on the edge, you reach out and tear a square. Soft, familiar. No one claps, no one writes it down. But it matters. It always has. You stand now in the stillness of your own bathroom. The lights are dim. The fan hums softly. There's a toothbrush in its holder, a folded towel on the rack, and beside you, the roll. The same one you've followed through centuries of history, across continents, beneath castles, and into space. And here it is again. Quiet, reliable, utterly unremarkable, until you realize it never truly was. Toilet paper isn't just a product, it's a daily affirmation. A decision we make often sleepily, sometimes urgently, always personally, that links us to every human who came before. The Roman soldier, the Tang dynasty noble, the prairie farmer, the suburban parent fumbling for a midnight square. This small action is part of something vast. Because as we've evolved, so too has this role, shifting not only in texture and size, but in meaning. From the early sponge on a stick to modern flushable wipes, we've sculpted comfort from necessity. And along the way, that journey has been shaped by war, economy, invention, shame, class, and yes, even love. Historians still debate the psychological reason behind our attachment to toilet paper. Why panic by it? Why stash it like treasure? Why wrap it around trees when we're feeling mischievous? Some say it's symbolic. Others say it's just practicality. But maybe it's simpler. When the world feels uncertain, we cling to what's essential. Not flashy, not trendy, just constant. You walk down memory lanes of crisis. The Great Depression, wartime rationing, economic recessions. In each, toilet paper disappears from shelves, reappears in headlines, becomes more than paper. It becomes promise. A promise that you are safe, that the most basic parts of you are seen, acknowledged, cared for, even if it's by a roll you barely notice until it's gone. And isn't that how we measure civilization? Not by the tallest buildings or the most dazzling inventions, but by how we treat the unseen, the unspoken, the private. A roll of toilet paper may not cure disease or end wars, but it comforts. It reassures. It quietly says, you're going to be okay. You remember the softness of your first childhood bathroom visit, the panic of realizing the roll was empty, the joy of discovering a backup beneath the sink, the moment in a hotel when the square was folded into a triangle, someone took the time just for you. You remember the pandemic shelves, the mutual glances with strangers, the relief when the store finally restocked, that feeling, that strange, tender gratitude. Because it turns out, this simple roll isn't simple at all. It's a cultural mirror, a personal comfort, a political flashpoint, a prank weapon, a luxury item, a survival tool, a daily routine, a punchline, a history lesson. And it's yours. Now, as the night settles deeper, you look at that roll one more time, not as something disposable, but as a quiet monument to how far we've come. A symbol of progress disguised as pulp. A revolution rolled up neatly, perforated for your convenience. You breathe in, you smile. Because in a world of uncertainty, you found something soft, strong, and surprisingly profound. The lights dim lower now. The air slows. The room wraps around you like a warm, familiar blanket. The echoes of ancient latrines and bamboo wiping sticks fade into silence. The factory machines fall still. The marketing jingles quiet to whispers. It's just you, and the steady, gentle beat of comfort. Let yourself sink into the quiet rhythm of breath. Inhale, exhale. Feel the softness not just of paper, but of knowing that you've traveled across time tonight, that you've laughed, maybe cringed, maybe even sighed at how beautifully absurd our history can be, and yet how human it all is. Let your muscles loosen, your eyelids grow heavy. Think of the simple roll waiting quietly in the corner of bathrooms everywhere. Reliable, underrated, unchanging, even as the world spins a little too fast outside. You don't need to solve anything now. You don't need to search the shelves or decode marketing. There's nothing left to unroll. Tonight, you've reached the end of the story. So let your thoughts soften like tissue in warm hands. Let the world slow to a hush. Let your mind drift through time, through space, through comfort. And when you wake tomorrow, maybe, just maybe, you'll glance at that little roll with a smile. Soft, silent, steady. Sweet dreams.